All right, it is 2021. Can you believe 2020 is over? And I know so many people are goal setting right now, coming up with goals, coming up with New Year's resolutions. You know how it is. You know what happens to you. You know what happens to your friends. It happens every year. Everybody talks about it. People feel bad oftentimes when they don't meet their goals. You can go out today to the to places where people are running, people are trying to exercise more, people are trying to start diets and do all these things. And today I'm going to talk about how to make better goals, and specifically about nature journaling. So a lot of times in the nature journaling community, we talk about how we want to grow, how we want to get better, and I'm going to talk about how to make goals specifically about nature journaling, but to make them in a way that helps you instead of hampers you. Because I think a lot of times the way that we create goals for ourselves, the way that we create expectations can end up actually having a negative effect in the end. So I'm going to go through some specific strategies. I did a bunch of research on goal setting. It's something that I'm interested in general. And I looked through a bunch of stuff about goal setting and made it specifically for nature journaling. So I'm going to talk about some of the ways that you can make better goals for nature journaling this year. I'm going to switch to my document camera and you will be able to see what I'm doing on paper here. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna break things down a little bit here, but starting off with the fact that a lot of times there's sort of different ways that goals can manifest. And this time of year, people talk about resolutions and goals, but I'm going to talk even more about, sometimes there's other aspects to this department that are similar. So a lot of times we come up with projects for ourselves. We often have unconscious wants and desires, and we have expectations. All of these things are similar to goals. So I will talk about them, and I think it can be really useful to distinguish between them, and especially this part right here. So I'm going to circle this. And a lot of times this time of year, we're creating conscious goals or conscious resolutions, but sometimes underlying those, there are unconscious desires and unconscious wants and expectations. And unless we understand those, we can often end up in these pitfalls because we get confused about what we're actually making a goal or a resolution about. So first of all, I would recommend trying to figure out what those are and to tell whether they are internal or external. So an example of an internal goal would be something that has to do with what you are putting in and what you are doing, as opposed to external, because a lot of external things, such as how many likes you get on your nature journal page when you post it on Facebook, that's something that is not a good idea to have a goal about, because it's outside of your control. And I'll talk about control a little bit more in a second, but first I'm going to go into why you're making the goal. So a lot of times we take that aspect for granted because we just come up with a goal, but let's make our goal even better by understanding what is the rationale. So if this is something that you haven't thought about already, I highly recommend spending some time at some point in your life figuring out what some of your core values are. And this is something that I think a lot of people take for granted, or maybe you can list 5 things that are your core values off the top of your head. But surprisingly, for how long we live on this planet, most people don't spend any time actually figuring that out. And if you do figure that out, it'll be a lot easier to stay on top of your goals or your resolutions, because you'll know why you are doing that in the first place. So for example, if you are trying to get a 6-pack or get a certain bikini size or something like that, that would be really useful before you embark on like a super difficult diet or some kind of exercise regime, to know why are you doing that. In what way is it going to make you feel better? Or is it something that you're doing for other people? Or is it something you're doing to compare yourself to other people? Obviously, that's not a nature journaling example, but it just to give you sort of an extreme example of why it's important to understand your why and to be really honest with yourself. Because sometimes we say, oh, well, I want to get a 6-pack abs because that'll make me feel better about myself or something, or make me feel healthy, but it might not actually be about that. So anyways, just, spend some time figuring that out. And you might be asking, well, how the heck do I figure that part out? So I'm going to give you 4 journaling exercises that I worked on to come up with what your core values are around nature journaling. So the first one is, and you don't have to do these right now, I'm not going to give you time in this video, but you better have something to write with so that you remember this stuff, or you can always come back and watch it again, I guess. But the very first one is to describe your ideal nature journal outing. What would your ideal nature journal outing look like? If you could just imagine the best nature journaling experience right now, what would it look like? Or if maybe you actually like doing studio work, a little bit more studio art or science illustration, what would your ideal session look like? Would you be, drinking a cup of Earl Grey tea with a cat curled up in your lap while you do some watercolor flowers or something? Like, if that's your ideal nature journaling or nature art session, write it out and describe what it would be like, and give yourself some time to do that. So that's the first one. That's the first prompt. The second prompt: if you had infinite time for nature journaling, if you didn't have a job, if you didn't have any other responsibilities, what kind of nature journaling would you do? What would it be like? So that's the second prompt. If you had infinite time for nature journaling, like, time is not an excuse, because a lot of people, that's what they say is holding them back is, oh, well, I have to take care of my family, or, oh, I'm working. When I retire, I'll be able to nature journal the way I want. So right now, eliminate all of those explanation, all those excuses, and just write. If you had infinite time for nature journaling, what would you do? Okay, the next prompt to help you figure out your core values around this is, if you were the last person on Earth, what kind of nature journaling would you do? Or how about this? Here's an even cooler imaginary scenario. If you could nature journal, but every single nature journal page that you made was invisible to everyone except you, and only you could see your nature journal pages, what kind of nature journaling would you do then? So if no one else could see your pages, if only you could see them, what kind of nature journaling would you do? So that would be I think that's the third or the fourth prompt there. What kind of nature journaling would you do if no one else could see your page, or if you were the only person left on the planet? What kind of nature journaling would you do? Okay, now I saved the last one for last. This is number 4. This is the fourth prompt to help you figure out what kind of core values you have that can help you fuel your goals. Because if you create goals, if you create New Year's resolutions, but they don't have a foundation based on something that you value, then it's going to be a lot harder to keep up with those resolutions or those goals. But when you understand really clearly the relationship between your core values and what you care about in life and your goals, then there's like a really clear column supporting the work that you're going to have to put in to make that resolution. And now this is the very last of those 4 prompts to help you figure out what your values are. And there's a reason why I save this one for last. And this is, a lot of times people don't like doing this one. This applies to, there's other ways to use this journaling prompt that I'll talk about in a different episode. But this is, imagine your funeral, okay? So a lot of people don't like doing this because it's kind of morbid, but we are mortal beings on this planet. And in our society, in modern day US in particular, people don't like to talk about this, but sometimes it's really useful to figure out what you value in life if you think about the fact that your life is finite, okay? So if you were at your funeral, what would people be saying about your nature journaling? So, or if you passed away, what would people say about your nature journal pages? Or would they not say anything? What would you want them to say? And you might not care. You might not, that might not be something that you want people to talk about after you've passed. But maybe you do. Maybe you think, I don't want to plant too many ideas into your heads about these potential answers to these prompts, because these are things for you to do on your own. But maybe you have some idea about what your legacy would be. So these are 4 prompts that are specifically designed to help you think about why you're nature journaling. And each one of these prompts targets a different motivation sphere for humans, and they're all pretty central and pretty important. So I'm going to review them. Actually, I'm not going to review them. If you got these already, or you can always go back and watch this video later, but those are 4 prompts I highly recommend you doing. And then once you figure out what your core values are, maybe write down like 5 core values, and you can edit that, you know, at the end of each year. So for example, I'll show you some of what my core values are. And I've done this several times, so I've had multiple iterations, and iteration is actually one of my values. Hold on, let me turn on a light a little bit more here. Okay, so just to give you an example of some values, but I'm not going to give you too many examples today, because what I don't want to do is to plant a bunch of other people's ideas, values, and goals and resolutions in your head, because that's already something that that is difficult for a lot of people, because we see like so-and-so has these goals, so-and-so has those. But anyways, just to give you an idea of what some core values could be, for me, learning is one of my hugest ones. So once you have this, you know, you could have one. For some people, it might be like family could be one. That's way up there at the top. And connection, love, things like that. Those are really important. And if you understand this, then later when you're writing out your goals, you can look back and say, does this line up with any of my values? And in that way, figure out how strong it is and whether it makes sense. Because if you're coming up with some of these that don't match up with your core values, then problem. And so some of you might be thinking, hey, this sounds kind of familiar. I feel like Marley has talked about this in a video before. Well, I have. And that's because I did a whole video about, it's basically a class that I taught at Wild Wonder. Some of you probably saw it there, but it's all about nature journaling mindset. And I talk about this whole thing of lining up your goals and your desired outcomes with your values. And really, if you don't have a why behind the what you're doing and how you're doing it, you can't pull the work that's needed. And so for New Year's resolutions, they often fail because we don't understand how this is really connected to something that we believe in. And if you know how it's connected to something you believe in, every time you remind yourself of that, when you're dealing with a difficult part in following through with that resolution, you remind yourself of that value, and it will really, really help a lot. I see Kit. Thank you, Kit. I know Kit has enjoyed the mindset class, and that video is available. It's called Unlock Your Potential. If you search for that on my YouTube channel, you will be able to find it. Okay, so the next step is kind of trying to distinguish the difference between some of these different types of goals. So let's go back over to the document camera here. Okay, thanks, Kit. And so there's different types of, there's several things that come into goals or are similar enough to goals that I think we should talk about them here. And this is a really interesting thing, because goal states is something that our brains really focus on a lot, is like what we want to get, what could be better. You know, even fantasies could be under here somewhere, fantasies. And so these are all kind of related, and they have different connotations. So like the word resolution, people almost only use that for New Year's, and I'm trying to think what are some other applications, but resolutions and goals have this very positive connotation, whereas, you know, fantasies and desires obviously have a slightly more negative connotation, but in a lot of ways they're really similar. So if they're not connected to your core values and you don't know where they're coming from, or you haven't really looked at them carefully, then that's the part that can be a problem. And some of them, such as expectations, can be applied to things that are completely outside of our control, like the behavior of other people or the weather, or whether or not there's going to be birds on your nature journaling trip. Like I've talked to Jack before, he led a trip that was called How to Draw Birds, and the birds didn't show up. So the thing is there's certain things that are there's difference between internal and external. And there's also this trichotomy of control, which I'm going to talk about, because some things are outside of your control or partially outside of your control. And if you create goals that are dependent on things that are outside of your control, then you're going to be disappointed, or you're just not going to have predictable results, and that can lead to more problems. And if your goals end up causing you to be less motivated, then that's a problem. So first, I'm going to talk about the difference between internal versus external. So there's a big difference between internal goals and external goals. So like for nature journaling, an internal goal would be something that is totally based on what I do, what I am capable of doing, and is not dependent on other factors such as whether people like something I did or not on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, or how many people watch this video. So that's a great example. So when I started making YouTube videos, a lot of times it would get like 3 views, okay? So I would spend all this time making a video, and I thought it was something really interesting, and it would only get a few views. And so that's a point where you notice, like, am I totally crushed by the fact that this got so few views? And if so, maybe that's because I had an expectation, an external expectation, or like a goal that I might not have even fully formulated in words about how much response there would be from other people to something that I created. And you can't control that. You might have partial control over that. Like, you can continue to improve what you're doing, or you can work on your craft, you know, but it's an external, it's not an internal. So what would be a different goal for me for a video like that? So instead, a goal can be, and this is a place where you can really, really reap a lot of rewards, is come with a goal that's internal, that is about learning, for example. So if I say, I'm going to make these, and it would be cool if a lot of people watch them, but even if a lot of people don't watch them, my goal is to learn. I'm going to learn about public speaking. I'm going to learn about improvising. I'm going to learn about some video editing technique, for example. So those are 3 things those are internal goals around making and producing and publishing a video, that those are all within my realm. Those are things that I have, that I'm almost going to get no matter what if I put in the work. Does that make sense? Hopefully that's making sense to people, the difference between the internal and the external. So next, and this is a crucial one for nature journaling, and I talk about this in my mindset video, is the difference between input-based goals versus output-based goals. Okay, and this is kind of similar to the last example that I just gave with making videos, is the difference between input versus output. So what does that even mean? So the crazy thing is that with nature journaling, a lot of what we do is about output. You know, like, what does your page look like? You know, how many pages you do. Actually, how many pages you do is kind of borderline. But it's like, what is your output? So if you make a goal about your output and like what it's gonna be like, how it's gonna look, that or the quality. Output has a lot to do with quality. I should write that down. Next to output is quality. Okay, think about it that way, is quality. So basically, these output-based goals are kind of like about quality of the product. It's about the product. Okay, the result. Input over here, this is about what you put in, like how much you put in, and is not about the product, it's about the process. So, you know, people have been saying this for thousands of years, and it's almost a cliche in art and all of these things. And it's like people say, you know, and there's all these like books about it that have sold millions of copies, but it's like, oh, it's about the path. It's about the journey, not the destination. And, you know, these are on those calendars, motivational calendars and all that stuff, okay? But, you know, truthfully, there's something to be said about it. And especially when it comes to nature journaling goals, it's really important, because if you have these, and a lot of times this is one of those hidden things, is people have these hidden goals, hidden expectations, hidden outcome dependence. People are really fixated on how good of an artist they're going to be or what their pages are going to look like. And when you're focused on that, it puts a lot of pressure, and for a lot of people, that can shut down the part of your brain that you need to get better. And so I think I made a whole video called how wanting to be good, wait, how does it go? How wanting to be good prevents you from better, or something like that. So if you focus on your input, if you just say, look, and this is the funny thing that is a quote from novelist, I think, is 2 crappy pages a day. If you tell yourself, I'm gonna write 2 crappy pages a day, see how that takes it from being an output-based thing to being an input-based thing. So instead of it being, I'm gonna write the best fantasy love scene ever written, or I'm gonna write a great historical fiction, blah, 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 whatever, or I'm going to make a beautiful nature journal page. Instead of doing that, you say that you're going to do 2 pages, and they could be crappy, and you don't care if they're crappy. So it's changing it from quality to quantity, and it's changing it from output to input. And when you focus on that, it suddenly will unlock so much for you. It can be so liberating, because instead of your brain fixating on this output and becoming sad, you're going to focus on this input and realize it's actually easy, and that you'll end up getting to the goal that you want, which is producing good output. So it's this huge irony, huge irony, that by focusing on your output, you're going to be sad and you're not going to make good product. But by focusing on the input, the process, you're going to reach your goal and have fun in the process, and end up actually making better quality product. So how does this relate to goals? Okay, hopefully you're kind of drawing the connections already. But if you make a goal that's very, very explicitly about input and not about output, and is very, very explicitly about the internal things as opposed to the external, that's going to help you so much, okay? So make sure your goals are conscious as much as possible, but be aware of what some of these underlying unconscious things could be. Don't pretend like they're not there. Don't forget to get your core values figured out. And I told you 4 different prompts for trying to figure what those are. Some of these are new prompts too, so I don't talk about those in my other video. And then, remembering that there's different kinds of goals and related goal states, ways that the human brain focuses on what we want. And then to remember, internal is better than external, and input is better than output, or process is better than product, or quantity is better than quality. So I'm going to write those other ones here too. So input is the same as quantity versus quality. And that sounds terrible, right? To say quantity versus, I care more about quantity versus quality. Well, actually, in the case of art, focusing on quantity versus quality is super helpful, especially when it comes to making goals. And then what was the other one? Process versus product. So you don't want to make goals about any of those, okay? Hello, Facebook user. I can't tell your name from here because sometimes the Facebook usernames don't show up. But no worries about being late. You can go back and see this video after it's recorded. And also I'm doing a little bit of, I've done recaps several times. It's part of learning better, is to kind of review every once in a while, encapsulate it. All right, so next, and this sounds really intimidating, trichotomy of control. Yes, so I think that one of the Stoic philosophers, maybe it was Epictetus, came up with this, maybe it was Seneca, came up with, it wasn't Marcus Aurelius, but there's this concept of the dichotomy of control. And I think Seneca or Epictetus or whoever it was said, there are things in life that are up to us, and there are things in life that are not up to us. And if you focus on the things that are not up to you and you're really attached to the outcome of those things, you're going to constantly be disappointed, because a lot of times things that are not up to you are going to happen in ways that you didn't want them to happen, and you might be, sometimes they're going to come out great, but you didn't have anything to do with it, okay? So if your goals are based on those things that are not up to you, that's going to be a problem. So that was often translated from the Roman, the Latin into English as the dichotomy of control. So what are the things that you can control and what are the things that you can't control? So like if you make goals about, the global pandemic, whether that's going to be better or not, or you have expectations around that, or you have goals around what the weather is going to be, obviously those are ridiculous even talking about them, but there's other examples that are more subtle and more problematic and are equally not inside of your control. So for example, when you make, so basically this though, I've thought about this a lot, and most people now think that it should be three things. There's the things that you have no control over, and that would be like the weather or the situation with the pandemic. There's things that you have some control over, and there's things you have you have control over. Whoops. All right, so I have to look at my cheat sheet real quick here. So, for example, things you have no control over are like the economy, the weather, how someone else feels. So you don't have control over how someone else feels, which is a really crazy thing to think about, and how other people act. You don't have control over how other people act. So if you in this area, that things you have no control over, you want to avoid explicit goal setting. You want to avoid prediction and regret and unconscious expectations and stories in this area, because you don't really have control over it. So for example, like how people react even to your nature journal pages that you post online is something that you basically have no control over. Some control over are your emotional reactions to things. So like if you're really disappointed, if someone gives you feedback about one of your nature journal pages and you have a really strong emotional reaction, that's something you only have partial control over. So creating goals, like if you say, so here's an example. Let me show you my face so I can be all funny. All right, so here's some examples. Now, this stuff is different a little bit now because pretty much all the nature journaling communities online. We're not nature journaling groups so much, but you could set a goal about like sharing or being a little bit more brave in the pages that you post. If you create a goal that says like, I'm not going to be afraid of posting my nature journal pages online, that is something that you probably have partial control over, but you don't have control over whether you're afraid or not. You see what I'm saying? You only have like partial control over that. So it would be unrealistic to say, I'm going to just be really brave and not afraid at all of posting my pages online. And so that would fall into the thing that you have some control over. And for those, what you want to do is you want to be really intentional when you craft your goals. So if it's something you only have partial control over, you want to be really careful when you craft your goals to make them internalized. And this can also go for if your goal is like to have more fun nature journaling, that is also something that you have only partial control over. So like if you're going to go on a field trip, or you're going to go out nature journaling by yourself, or you're just making a goal for the whole year of having more fun nature journaling, I would say that you don't have complete control over that. You have partial control over that. So making it an internalized goal instead of just saying, I'm going to have fun is going to help a lot. So for example, you could say, you could even just cheat a little bit by saying, I'm going to try to have fun. But that's a little bit lame. So let's skip straight over to what you have complete control over, because that's where you want to focus your goals. So there are some things here at the bottom in the Trichotomy of Control that you have complete control over. And the crazy thing, the more your life goes on, or just the more you think about it, the more you realize that what you actually have control over is very small. That makes it even more precious. So the things that you have control over are your choices. So even choosing to make goals around nature journaling, that's something you have control over. You also have control over the story you tell yourself to explain something. So this is one of the places that I talk about in the mindset video of like where you can really step in, because if you if you're telling yourself a story, if something happens, like say you you draw a kangaroo and you're trying to nature journal a kangaroo and it doesn't come out very good. The drawing doesn't look objectively realistic, and you have control over the story that you tell yourself. And you might have inherited a story around that, based on talent, and you might say something like, I'm not good at nature journaling kangaroos, or I'm not good at drawing animals at all. And a lot of people have these stories. That is something that you have control over. And as soon as you recognize what you're saying to yourself, you can change it, and you can change it into something, I haven't drawn kangaroos very often. I haven't practiced drawing moving animals. I'm not good at drawing moving animals yet. I need to practice drawing moving animals more. So you flip it and you make it something that is within your control and allows for growth. So that's an example of something that you do have control over, is the stories that you tell yourself. And let's see, what else do we have control over? We also have control over what you decide to focus on, so your attention. And that's something I know John Muir Laws talks about all the time, is the importance of attention. And this is really a big thing in nature journaling. So if your goal is, I'm going to put more attention to nature journaling, that would be something you have control over. What else? How you think about yourself is also something that you have control over. So this is where we really want to focus our goals, okay? So if we're making goals, we want to focus on things that we have control over. And if we're doing things we have partial control over, we need to make those very intentionally internalized goals. But let's just take this arrow all the way here and focus on those things that we have control over. Okay, so now here's something that is adapted from some more general stuff. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take a second to look at some of the comments, because I see it looks like there's a lot of comments going on here. I see that Annetta Nature Sketches is here. Good to see you. Kit is here. Good to see you. Annetta McCracken is here and thinks legacy. I just can't wrap my head around. Yes. Okay. I get it. And that's something that I'd be interested to think about a little bit more. And it could just be, we often don't want to think about what the world is going to be like when we're gone. It's obviously sort of a sad thing to think about. And some people, I think, are worried about feeling like maybe egotistical or something. If the word legacy is a really big word, people talk about it with presidencies. Why would I talk about it with myself? So think about those two things. Those potentially are places that could be preventing you from wrapping your head around the concept of legacy. Kit says cliches are cliches because they are true. Very funny. Very true. Let's see. Jean is here. Hi, Jean. Good to see you here. Hi, Karina. I'm really glad you enjoyed the mindset talk also. And let's see what Kit says here. Let's see. Let me post Kit's comment because it looks like a good one. All right, Kit. Nice self-awareness there. Yeah, going to the zoo more would have been a tough. Going to Nature Journal at the zoo more, or going to Nature Journal at more field trips, is an example of something I would say probably we have partial control over. And this year is a really good example to show us that even something like nature journaling, I made a video around this time last year, how to nature journal in crowded public places. And wow, big surprise how this year has taught. And that's something that part is completely outside of our control. So no matter how much you want a nature journal at the zoo, a lot of those places are closed. So good example of that. And also just, we figure these things out. None of us are perfect, but obviously you can tell Kit is doing a lot of practicing that self-awareness muscle and getting better at it. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about, and I guess I actually was planning on doing this one first before I talked about the trichotomy of control, but is small goals. And a lot of people have probably heard about this in other arenas because this is pretty standard goal setting knowledge. So take this word SMART, right? SMART, and we're going to look at all your goals should be SMART. So they should be specific. Okay, so saying even just nature journaling more, that's not a specific goal, and it's definitely not measurable. And you want your goals to be specific, and you want them to be measurable. You also want them to be attainable. Okay, and this is a huge problem, is a lot of times people shoot really high. And I would say I would really exaggerate this one. Like sometimes it's useful to make it really attainable, like more than attainable, but like almost ridiculously attainable. So, I've done things where I've told myself I'm gonna nature journal for 5 minutes, like a ridiculously short amount of time. But by keeping it so short, what happens is it's kind of like small plates of food at a fancy restaurant. When you get done with that really small plate of food, you still want more. But if you get done with a 2-hour nature journaling session, you might be tired of nature journaling, and it doesn't leave your brain with the right feeling. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant. So it has to be connected. This is a good example, probably connects back to your core values. So if your goal is relevant to your life, relevant to your core values, that's going to help a lot. And then the last one is time bound. Even just by saying like for a month or once a month or once a week, or I'm going to do it for 1 year and see how it goes, or just 1 week and see how it goes, that makes it more specific, but it just makes it easier to manage because it's connected to time. A lot of times people make these open-ended goals that are not specific. They're very kind of vague, like I'm going to get healthier, or I'm going to nature journal more is probably not specific enough. Measurable is part of the way to deal with that. So like if your goal is to 1 nature journal page a day, that would be measurable. And to make it attainable, you could say 1 crappy, and that's just a funny way. I'm hopefully not offending anyone, but 1 crappy nature journal page a day, that would make it attainable, because what you're saying is it doesn't matter about the quality. And that goes back to this concept that it's about the output. The input, not the output. So 1 crappy nature journal page, that makes it really attainable. That takes the pressure off. Relevant. How is this connected to my values? So spend a little bit of time thinking about, like if you said, I want to, participate more in the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, maybe one of your core values was community, up here in core values, learning, community. If community was one of your core values, and you remember that when you're goal setting, and you create a goal that is relevant to community, so you could say, or here would be another one, start a nature journal club. That could be a goal. Start a nature journal club in my native language, in my mother language. And a lot of people have done that in 2020. Several people have started nature journal clubs in Norwegian, in Spanish, in German. Actually, the German one might have been started before 2020. But that would be very relevant to community if that was one of your core values. So that would help a lot. And then time bound. So like if starting a nature journal club in your mother language or in your region. It could be in my region. If that were your goal, you can make it time bound. You could say by time bound is, like a deadline. There's a reason why deadlines work for people. So make a nature journal club in my region by, I don't know, September. That's kind of a long time, but that at least gives you a place on the calendar. Okay, so how are people, what are people thinking about this? Are these ideas making sense? I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve, but let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Oh, I see here's some cool ones. Yes, okay, so Nature Sketches is saying, I need to give myself permission to create low quality pages sometimes. Yes, that is so true. And let me see if I have some of my own such pages. I mean, sometimes it can be even hard to do this sketchnoting or kind of note taking I'm doing in my nature journal right now. This is the kind of thing, like if you're really precious about your nature journal, you might not even do writing like this in it. But let me show you a couple pages that I would say are ones where I gave myself permission to try, and I think that's a really good goal. Let's see here. So ones that are more, process focused, or you're just being kind of more easy on yourself. Like this one, I don't even know what exactly was going on here. This was during a chat actually. Ooh, there's some top secret stuff on here about an upcoming virtual nature journaling thing. I probably shouldn't be showing that. Here's one though about pruning fruit trees. And I just did this page, I kept it really simple, and I didn't have a lot of pressure on myself and wasn't worrying about it. So I think what Nature Sketches is saying is a really good point. There's another Facebook user here who is saying, trying to begin doing this with our kids this year. Okay, so that would be a cool thing to try to come up with. Let's see if we can use what we've learned so far to help Facebook user come up with a goal. And I think trying to begin doing nature journaling with our kids this year has some of the elements that we're looking for in a good goal. Let's see if we can fine tune it even more. Let's do this. Let's look at this specific goal and see if we can figure it out. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna switch cameras here again, and let's see. So, trying to begin nature journaling with our kids this year. How could we write that out as a goal that would be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, and also cover some of these other things we've talked about? So one thing to point out is you don't have control over other people, even if they're your children. So your children might be the people in the world that you think you have the most control over, but I'm sure most parents quickly realize that they don't have complete control over what their children do. So that's one thing we're going to want to think about in crafting this. And I hope this Facebook user, sorry, I can't tell what your name is, but I hope that you're okay with us taking your goal and crafting it into an even better one. But one thing I would say is, you could internalize that. So one thing, for example, that is really helpful in getting kids to start nature journaling is start nature journaling yourself. So I'm going to make a little box here. So one way you could internalize that goal is you could say, let's see, I want to, I'm going to do incomplete sentences. Nature journal with my kids, because that makes you part of the equation. Which is what you already said. Okay, yeah. So what about even taking another step further, which could be modeling nature journaling? Running out of space. To my kids. Another one would be finding other kids, finding other kids that nature journal. Or introducing my kids to inspiring nature journal material. to sources of, I'll just say sources of inspiration. That could be videos, whatever. So now you see how nature journaling with your kids is something you do have, is a pretty good goal. You have partial control over it. And you especially have the control over what you do. So for example, if you model nature journaling to your kids, and just when you go out, you pull out the nature journal and you do it, that's something you have a lot more control over. Finding other kids that nature journal, that's also something that you have control over. And introducing your kids to sources of inspiration. So these are just a few examples of some things, some other ways you could frame this goal or kind of create other potential goals or resolutions around this desire to do this more with your kids. I'm sure there's other things I'm not thinking of right now. And then let's take this same goal. Thank you, Facebook user, for being so helpful here with this one. And like I said, this is a pretty great goal already, but just to kind of make it even better. So let's take it over here. Let's take it over here first. So internal versus external. Maybe I mentioned this already, but in this case with your kids, this is kind of a mixture. So this goal is, and I think just doing this exercise is very helpful in realizing this goal about something with your family is a mixture between internal versus external. And that's fine. That's fine, but just realizing what that implies. Now let's look at it over in here in this input versus output. How can we make this goal really about input and not about output? So you could maybe make some part of the goal about like how much time you're going to spend, or make it really clear to the kids that, like you could even say, all right, we're going to spend an hour and we're going to go to the park, or we're going to go to a place you could go to a place that the kids already like. You can bring the nature journaling stuff and maybe not even put the pressure on the actual nature journaling, but just be like, you model it, go to the park once a week, go to the park for an hour and have all the nature journaling stuff there, and say, okay, look here, we're going to the park. We're going to, explore time in nature. Got all this stuff I'm going to be doing, and this is here. So that would be a way to focus on the input and also to focus on making it internal. So you are doing your part. And in a lot of ways, I feel like those are some tricks from my experience working with kids, and especially working with teenagers. Those are some tricks that are probably going to actually help you get your desired outcome even better. And sometimes, having an idea of like, oh, I'm going to nature journal with my girlfriend more, or something like that, or I'm going to nature journal with my family, is something that's a little bit tricky because you don't have complete control over it. Now let's go to the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound aspect of this goal. So how can we make this goal even more better? So specific. We could be as specific as possible. What is nature journaling look like for you and your family? Is it, if you just show them John Muir Law's book, or you show them some amazing nature journal pages on Facebook, and you don't really, and you just tell them like we're going to nature journal more as a family this year, it may not be super clear what the expectation is for them. So if you're really specific about what nature journaling looks like, what that time is going to look like as a family, that will help this goal be a lot better. Making it measurable. So like I said, if you just go to the park for 1 hour a week, that would be measurable. Attainable, making it not too big. So maybe it's 1 hour a month. Maybe 1 hour a month is a better goal for nature journaling with your family, for 1 hour a month. Making it relevant. So like, what are your family values? What are your kids' values? Maybe you could eat them. They value. I have a feeling this is going to be one of their values. Okay. Usually if you ask kids what they care about, that's going to be in there. So if you're making goals for someone else, which you're kind of doing in this case, thinking about what that other person values as much as you do is probably important. That's going to make it relevant. Okay. And, or what about their friends, So a lot of kids, if you ask them what they value, they're going to say something about their friends. So that goes back to one of my initial ideas, is finding other kids that nature journal, or even if that's online, which it probably will be right now, how can you connect the things that you value, the things that your kids value, to your goal of nature journaling more with your kids? So that's relevance. And then time bound. You could say, we'll try this for 3 months and then reevaluate. You could say, you're going to do like the hour thing, kind of like the measurable one. Those are all ways, I think. So thank you so much, Facebook user, for your, it'd be cool to know your name. Type your name into the comments if you're okay with that, or else I'm just going to keep calling you Facebook user. But thanks to Facebook user for sharing their personal goal, and us kind of just going through a process of what it would look like to develop that a little bit more specifically. All right, let me look at some more comments on here. Thanks, everybody. This is super fun. Let's see, Karina B. I think I've oh, here, I'm going to put this up so everyone can read it, including people on Facebook. Very cool. Okay, so Karina used what I call a piggyback habit based on my video that I did before, where she connected a nature journaling practice with her morning coffee. So this is something I'm going to talk about. So good prediction here. I have a couple tips at the end here for getting better results and better follow through with your goals, because that's a really important part. Is not just making better goals will help you with the follow through, but there's still some tips about follow through. So Karina did a thing where she's actually realizing that by combining her nature journaling with her morning coffee, in many ways fulfilled some of these aspects of a SMART goal. Whoa, I'm out of focus. Sorry, this camera sometimes does that. Woo. Okay, so thank you, Karina, for sharing that. That's really cool. Let's see. Kit hadn't heard about the SMART thing. I did not invent SMART goals. I don't know who did, but it's one of those things you find everybody who talks about goals almost talks about it. And Kit's mentioning another concept from the Nature Journal Mindset video, which is bread and butter journaling. So bread and butter journaling is the thing that's kind of like your staple. So for me, it's doing landscape ethos and doing I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And that helps keep the pressure low for Kit. So that's really cool. Let's see here. That's funny. Anyetta, sorry, I don't totally know how to pronounce your name properly. Anyetta is saying that she had SMAT goals because she didn't know about the relevant part. All right, Jose Jimenez, buenas noches, feliz año nuevo, igualmente. Jose is in Patagonia, in Argentina, Barilocoche, and he has started a nature journal club down there. Super cool. Thank you, Jose. Nature sketches, weather tracking is so great to do with children. So I'm gonna show this here. Anyone who's working with children, that could be a really great concept. Could also be very low pressure. I know something that I'm really excited about is this idea of a family nature journal. So instead of like every kid in your family has their own nature journal, you can have like one nature journal that you take with you to the park. And this is really good for bringing in the littler kids and kind of balancing out the competition and individuality that can come from each person having their own nature journal. And so this can apply, I think, to what Annetta is talking about with from Nature Sketches with a weather thing, is to have like a single journal that's for the family, and you could all work together collaboratively in there, and it takes the pressure off, and you could go to the park. The parent can nature journal for a little bit, put the book down, leave the colored pencils there. Parent can go do their own thing. The kids might be running around and throwing berries at each other, but then they come back and they're like, oh, I'm gonna squish some berries on the paper and then draw a little picture of what the bush looks like. And so that's a really low pressure, cool thing to do. And I think that would work great with Nature Sketches idea here of weather journaling. Yes, that I think good points there. Okay, so Yadana is the Facebook user with the family goal. Thanks, Yadana. And wondering how we could look at some of the examples of arrangements in the laws book, which we have, and maybe focus on one type of observation. Love the inclusion of values. We will try an hour a week. So great. So this sounds awesome. Yadana is already doing some of the smart value things right here in this comment. So she's focusing it in and making a really good point that John Muir Law's nature journaling book is huge. There's so much in there, it can kind of be intimidating. So I can see that Yadana is narrowing that into some more specific things. And remember, specific is the first aspect of the SMART goals, and focusing on one type of observation. I think that's a great idea. Oh, maybe the book you have is How to Teach Nature Journaling. If not, I highly recommend getting that one. And if that is the book you're talking about, that book, I don't have my books, all of my nature journaling books here because I'm visiting family. But in that book, there are like these specific activities. And one thing to do would just be to commit to one of those and just do that one for like a month with your family every time you go or whatever. So that is a great idea. And awesome, cool. And it sounds like Annetta has the family nature journal as well. Maybe, you know what, maybe it was actually Dallas that told me about, yeah, Dallas was the one that told me about that concept. So thanks, Annetta. All right, so now I'm gonna go into my last couple of tips here that I think are gonna help you with the follow through on all of these goals. So, and also if you have maybe we could do one other person who has a goal or an idea, a desire that they want to fine tune, post it in the comments and we can work together as a group to make it even better. All right, so follow through is really important, right? Because how can we actually follow through with our goals? Because sometimes what happens is making New Year's resolutions can turn into a form of self-disappointment and maybe later self-judgment, self-criticism, self-punishment, whatever you want to call it. So how can we do better? So I've got a couple tricks here. One is, I mentioned this one already, is to have goal byproducts, built-in goal byproducts. So the example I gave earlier was I'm making videos for YouTube, but one of the things that's going to be a byproduct, no matter how good the video comes out or how many people watch it, is there's some skills that come out of that are skills that will be useful to me no matter what. So if you create a goal that no matter what, even if you don't really achieve the goal, that you get some type of skills out of it that are useful, then that is good. That will help. And then let me talk about this also. Failure. This is an important word and concept in this context. So there's different types of failure. One failure would be to create a goal and not achieve it and then to fail. Another type of failure would be to not make a goal because you think you're going to fail and you're afraid of not achieving the goal, so you don't do it. What would be, so those are kind of like the two main types of failure. And I think trying something and failing, you learn from more. So there's some types of failure that lead to learning, and there's some types of failure that preclude any learning. So that's one thing. Accountability, this is a huge one. So accountability is a huge one. And one of the main things I recommend for this is doing stuff in groups. So for example, if you're trying to work out more or trying to nature journal more, nature journaling with another person is going to help you. It's going to be more fun, but it also creates accountability and will help you achieve your goal much more likely. And then here's another one is habits. We talked about this a little bit, and this would apply to Yadana also for your family. Is to create, once something becomes a habit, it doesn't require discipline. Actually, a lot of people think, in a couple months or maybe even a couple weeks, people are going to think they don't have enough of this, okay? oh, I just didn't have enough of this. I didn't have enough to stay on my diet. I didn't have enough to nature journal every day. I didn't have enough of this. And you know, to tell you the truth, this is kind of overrated. So screw that. All right. What you want is a habit, okay? Because once something becomes a habit, you don't need this every day because you're doing it automatically, okay? So making something a habit is not always super easy, but one of the things, and I talk about this more in that other video, but I think Karina mentioned this already, is the piggyback habit. So if you have a habit already, you can piggyback on it. So if you already drink coffee every day or eat breakfast every day or go for a walk once a week with your family, you can piggyback nature journaling goals onto that. It could even just be, you know, wear my binoculars when I go for my walk after dinner. Wear binoculars on my walk. And maybe that will help you look at more birds or something, and then you'll nature journal those when you get home. So that's the piggyback habit. Way better than self-discipline, way more reliable, and you're way less likely to just be hard on yourself and blame yourself for not having something that's kind of like an abstract concept. And I think most people have a really similar amount of self-discipline. So if you're just creating the story, oh, I don't have self-discipline, that's not really helpful. And yeah, so this is one trick. Another one would be to do it with a group of people. Another one is to do it, frequency is really important. So in creating a habit, you know, I have to say, if you make it something that you do every day, it has a big effect. So if you do a really small amount of nature journaling every single day, that will become a habit more easily than nature journaling for 5 hours once a month. That's just the way that your brain works. You can also do rewards. This really helps with habits. Nature journaling has built-in rewards, but if you eat chocolate or buy yourself an ice cream, oh my gosh, I didn't have chocolate for making this video. I'm sorry, everybody. I usually do. But if you give yourself a reward when you're done nature journaling, that will help build a habit. And the more you build it as a habit, the less of this you will need. Yay! Isn't that something you wanted to hear? Okay. And also, this is the other word. This is a synonymous word that people use a lot when it comes to New Year's resolutions. And you don't want to rely on that. You don't want to rely on either of those two things, okay? Okay, last thing, okay, this is being self-aware too and just being realistic, is it's very real that we have, you know, a lot of stuff going on inside of our bodies and our heads. And some of that is just, you know, it could just be you didn't sleep last night. You could be tired. You could be dehydrated. And so that is just your state. That is like just biologically what's going on inside of you. And now, if that day when you're feeling a certain way or whatever, you try to implement your goal, your nature journaling goal, and you try to nature journal for 1 hour or whatever, and you fail, you could blame yourself and come up with all these stories, such as, I have no willpower. I have no willpower or self-discipline. You could tell yourself nature journaling is just not for me, is too hard, or not for me. But what you don't realize is that it's just your state. So just being aware that taking care of this, or even just realizing that this is a thing, and that you don't have these like crazy expectations that you're gonna perform when you need to maybe just get a little bit more sleep, or so, you know, be easy on yourself and try to be self-aware and be your own parent. So that is my last little secret tip. I'm going to look back at the comments and see what other things people have posted in the comments. All right, cool. So Karina is saying, giving an example of something that's helped her. Okay, yeah, a great idea. So what Karina is mentioning is similar to something that Heather Krellin mentioned in an interview I did for Nature Journaling Beginners, and it was also in the recent compilation that I did. And basically, what Karina and Heather are both doing is they're reducing what I call resistance. So resistance is the number of steps that it takes you, the amount of work between the amount of steps and the amount of work between you deciding you're going to nature journal and getting out your nature journaling supplies. So the more zippers, the more straps, the deeper, the heavier, the more hidden your nature journaling stuff is. Or if your art supplies take forever to set up your studio or to clean up your studio, or to get to the place that you want to nature journal. If you have to get in a car, then get on a bus, then get on a boat to go nature journaling, and then hike for a day. That's a lot of resistance. That's a lot of steps between you having the idea and actually nature journaling. So what Karina is talking about, what Heather is talking about, is reducing that to the minimum to make it really easy for you to nature journal. And this is a good one for people who want to be spontaneous and just want to nature journal at the same time, same day, every week. Making it really easy to initiate a nature journaling session. So really great tip, Karina. I love that one, especially for increasing, if your goal is to nature journal more. This would be a specific goal. Could be, instead of just saying like, I want to nature journal more, maybe you could steal Karina's idea and say, I want to make it easier to initiate a nature journaling session by making a really simple kit that's really portable and is right next to the door of my house. That would be an awesome, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goal. That would be internal. It would be input-based, not output-based. That would be a really good goal for someone, and doesn't put pressure on the quality of your product. Okay, here's a good one from Kit. I like the idea of a placeholder in this context. And yes, this would be similar to the creating a super attainable goal. So, saying I'm going to nature journal. If you start off saying I'm going to nature journal for 10 minutes a day, you might find that after a while, the 10 minutes easily stretches out into more. And this could apply to the example with family. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. That was super great audience participation. I hope this really helps you come up with better nature journaling goals. This is the time of year people are doing it. And whether you're doing it intentionally or not, there's probably some part of your brain that's coming up with some desires or expectations, dreams, fantasies, resolutions, whatever you want to call them. That is happening in your brain, whether you're being intentional about New Year's resolutions or not. And so just making that process a little bit more conscious and having a few tools that we talked about today that can help you make better goals is going to make a huge difference. And I feel like understanding this is even more important than understanding, specific watercolor techniques or anything like that. So I really hope that you take this with you. This does apply to all other aspects of life, even though I'm not talking about those things in here. So you could apply those to other aspects of your life if you want, but for the very least, apply this to your nature journaling. And I can't wait to see how we all do in 2021 with these much better, much smarter, much more intentional goals and resolutions. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.